Manchester, Auburn, Candia. It's the Progress Report. And because this is, my God, folks, believe it, this is the first Wednesday in September. The kids are back to school. Labor Day's behind us. It means I'm able to welcome back my good friend and a great American. I stole that from you. Lou D'Alessandro, Senator Lou, who has done so much for so many people over so many years. And we're very pleased that he joins us on the first Wednesday of every month, which this is, and he's with us today. And we have a lot of interesting things to talk about today. And we're very, very pleased to welcome to our show tonight. And I think this may be the second time in the almost 8 years we've been doing the show. 8 years, Lou.
Oh, time flies when you have
fun.
fun.
My God, can you believe it?
Right.
And that is Sarah Jane Kanoy, who was the executive director of the Granite State Organizing Project, or GSOP, as it's fondly known by everybody who cares about what they do. And we want to talk about some subjects tonight that are really important and upfront. The immigration crisis that we're facing in New Hampshire, the tearing apart of families. We want to talk about the most recent iteration and really distressing part of that, the Trump call through not himself but his Attorney General to rescind the DACA program, Deferred Action on Childhood Arrivals, to actually begin to limit the ability of people who are brought to this country as children, infants, toddlers, up to teenagers, with no responsibility on their part for being here without documents. If they'd been born here under one of the Civil War amendments, they would be citizens, but because they weren't born here but brought here by their parents when they had no other options in life except to go where their parents were, and now we're attacking these people and telling them that they're not welcome in our country. So those are some of the things we want to talk about tonight. And we always welcome your calls, 640-3091. And we hope that those of you that are now paying attention, we'll be back in future shows with a lot about the upcoming municipal elections here in Manchester, starting with mayor and all the way down to our at-large people, and particularly many contested races. We'll be getting to that. But tonight we're going to talk about some larger issues which affect the whole nation, and particularly New Hampshire. So, Lou, take it away.
Oh, thank you, Bob. But I think immigration is certainly an issue that we should focus on. Remember, my grandparents came to this country from Italy. My grandmother was 15 years of age. My grandfather was 16 years of age on my dad's side. And on my mother's side, her father was a young guy. We actually researched the records. Now, they say, some people say, well, they were legal immigrants. Well, how the hell do we know that they were legal immigrants? They were youngsters who came to this country because they didn't have tuberculosis or another communicable disease. They were let in to this country to.
What was the approximate time they would have come, Lou?
In 1906, 1907.
When Ellis Island was
Ellis Island.
welcoming,
they came through Ellis
vast
Island.
numbers of people who were treated well and welcomed.
Right, and came from Naples, where most of the Italian immigrants began their journey. Came steerage, which means they were at the bottom of the boat,
right?
The bottom of the boat, and came to this country. And if you looked at some of the things that the president has said, they didn't speak English. They didn't really have super skills. My grandmother was a cook, and my grandfather really made his living eventually as a salesman. So, given that background, they probably would have been sent back under this new regime. But I think I wrote a little something on Facebook, and I said, America is perceived of as the land of the free and the land of opportunity.
Yeah.
And
give me your tired, your huddling masses.
Right. And how could we
yearning to be free?
How can we turn our backs on people in this day and age? 800,000 young people now, as the president said, they aren't babies anymore. They're basically teenagers are in their 20s, but they know no other country.
Right.
They've never been to another country. So it's a real dilemma that we face. The president kicked it off, and he had the Attorney General who I find to be the most objectionable person I've ever met,
Yeah.
give the iteration.
Yeah, he didn't do
and-
himself, did he?
Yeah, he never does himself any good.
He's
And,
not much shy about being out there usually.
no, and I think he's he's had some veiled racist comments, and he's represented that point of view, and I find that to be very objectionable. As I say, I teach at St. A's, and I teach a course called State and Local Government. And when I tell my students that when I was in the service, segregation was preeminent, and the blacks didn't get on with the whites outside of the base, and my drill sergeant was a black guy, Sergeant McClellan. When we left the base, he had to go one way, I had to go the other way. Washington, D.C. was a segregated city. The capital
Oh, yeah.
of the United States was a segregated
Oh,
city.
yes, it certainly was.
So we don't want to go back to that
Yeah.
period in our history. But this immigration thing, they had the march at the Norris Cotton Building. I participated in one of those marches early on. My daughter participated this week. We as good citizens have a moral compass, and boy, if we lose that moral compass, then really we've lost the reason why America is what it is, and we can't let that happen. We just cannot let that happen.
Well, we have somebody with us who can not only talk the talk, as you've done very well, Lou, but is walk the walk, and that's Sarah Jane Kanoy. And Sarah, tell us a little bit about what you do, what Granite State Organizing Project is, and then why this immigration issue has become such a priority for you and GSOP.
Sure. Well, the Granite State Organizing Project is made up mostly of faith communities, and we consider ourselves to be a values-based organization. We do have some member groups that are not explicitly faith communities, but they're also groups like the Adult Learning Centers or the
And by the
homeless
way,
shelter.
your faith communities encompass quite a spectrum, don't they?
Absolutely.
From, Episcopalian churches to Catholic churches to the Unitarian Universalist Church.
yeah.
I mean, this is quite a range of theologies.
Yes, and Jewish temples.
And
just
Jewish,
the whole
could not leave that out.
No.
They're
Right.
very active.
the whole spectrum. But I think, what the senator said is so important about his parents came or his grandparents came and they were fleeing from tuberculosis. The people that are here now, particularly the youth affected by DACA, their parents came here fleeing starvation, fleeing hunger, or fleeing gang violence in their own countries.
Threats to their very being.
Yeah, no, they came for really legitimate reasons. And then the idea that we would blame a child who was brought by his parents at a time when, as you say, he or she has no control over where they live. The idea that we would now try to expel these children is really disturbing. But in terms of the work of the Granite State Organizing Project, some of the churches in our organization, the Catholic churches in particular, have large populations of what I call mixed status or blended families. So there'll be a mom who's a citizen and a dad who's not able to become a citizen because he crossed the border against the law, and one child will have been born here and another child will have been born somewhere else. And so every time these deportations or these threats happen, the stress on families is incredible. And every time we send someone back, we're ripping apart a family that has deep roots in New Hampshire. So I think for that reason, the Granite State Organizing Project felt this is a moral issue. This is, as you say, an issue of our moral compass.
Is this your number one priority right now for the GSOP?
I would say right now it is. Because since the election, what we have seen, and I would actually say since the middle of the primary season, what we saw was increased levels of hate speech, increased levels of name calling, of stereotyping people based on their ethnicity. And then since the election, we've seen increased stops of people on the state highways for driving while brown. We've seen increased calls to ICE anytime a person of color is stopped on the highway. And we've seen this massive attempt to deport the Indonesians who live in the seacoast area, which is another whole issue that we could talk about.
You talk about highway, stops. it was kind of shocking to a lot of people that they set up a stop in Thornton, New Hampshire, on I-93.
Woodstock, yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
you know,
Unbelievable.
I mean, you know, people just driving back from going to the White Mountains.
know.
I mean, you know, I mean, that's kind of shocking. It seems like a long way from any border, particularly the border that we're supposed to be concerned about, which is Mexico, not Canada.
Right.
I think we should be concerned about neither, frankly. But you know, that's
Yeah.
that's just astonishing to me that this could happen in New Hampshire. Because I don't think it's, as I understand the Constitution, and I did practice law for quite a few years, you know, you're supposed to have a reason, probable cause for search and seizures. And, you know, yet this happened. I don't understand it.
Well, I think the fact that when President Obama put DECR in place, all of these people registered. And as a result of that, all of that information is available, and that's why we're seeing.
And it's
these-
now available to
Right.
to help the people who want to deport them,
Exactly.
which is a
And-
breach of faith in
Yeah,
a big way.
I think so, a real breach of faith, because in good conscience, they registered and did so, you know, under the guise that they would be protected. And,
right.
you know, when you think of it, and I just think this moral compass issue is so important. If we lose our sense of morality and we lose our sense of moral compass, then the entire nation suffers a terrible, negative situation. And you know, I look at the president, and some of the things he says tells me quite clearly he doesn't have a moral compass. And I find that very disturbing, very disturbing. And you know, I lived through as a youngster growing up. I lived through the 60s. I was in college. I lived through the Kennedy assassination, the Martin Luther King assassination, the Robert Kennedy assassination. Saw this country ripped apart by the Vietnam conflict. Saw many of my colleagues in college who served in Vietnam come back, and you know, their lives totally destroyed, and all under the great banner of let's protect democracy and let's protect our country. And people gave so much, and it looked like we were making strides. We were moving, you know, in the right direction. And now, I just witness again from my vantage point. I can only speak for myself. We're turning the clock back.
Yeah.
Turning
I-
it back,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm very worried, you know, about that. My kids, my children, my grandchildren, my great grandchildren. Our goal in life is to make this a better place.
It should
Yeah.
be
You know,
everybody's goal in
and-
life.
Yeah.
And
Make
if-
a difference.
Right, and if we
Right.
back away from that, and it just seems to me that we are backing away from that. I listen to the Speaker of the House. I find him to be an objectionable character. Look at when I think the majority leader of the Senate is making sense, I really get worried. I'll tell you, when he's the most sensible of the three, you know, that causes me great concern. But you know, there's got to be a point when people recognize that, you know, doing the right thing is the right thing to do. You know, and we've got to do that. And I understand people's concern. You know, the economic situation isn't as good as they would like it to be. The wages aren't as good as they would like it to be. The benefits aren't as good as they would like it to be. But you can't take that out on somebody else. You got to take that out on the process that you allow to be put in place. You know, we voted for these people, and these people are causing the problem. I'm very worried. I mean, I'm being very honest and
Well, this
and
is a
very
lady.
candid.
This is a lady who's helping to do something
Right.
about it, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that because, we had that rather amazing meeting down at Blessed Sacrament Church a week ago, Friday, I guess it was, and you know there was a turnout there that vastly exceeded expectations, and people really committed to doing things, and things are happening. So tell us about what's been happening and what you'd like to see happen as we go forward.
Sure. We've been convening meetings of the faith community from all across New Hampshire to create a network of immigrant solidarity and support and accompaniment. And we've had a tremendous response, as you said, Bob. So we've had hundreds of churches. They're going to be deciding what they can do to help. Some churches will offer financial support to people whose families have been torn apart by deportation. And so for people who've lost their breadwinners, some churches will offer financial support. Some churches will offer to do the vigils and go with people, go with immigrants to their ICE check-ins to the every
And most
month.
of these are happening right here in Manchester, is that
Right
right?
here in Manchester, at the North Cotton Building.
North Cotton Building.
So because the Indonesian population on the seacoast followed the law, they came here as tourists, war erupted in their home country, Christians were being killed, they stayed because they were afraid to go home, they applied for asylum, they were denied the right to get asylum in this country, they were given by our government permission to stay from year to year, they were given work permits, allowed to work,
Right.
as long as they checked in every so
Right,
often.
right.
Now, because we know where they are, we know who they are now being targeted to be deported. So there's at least 68 individuals from the seacoast that have been told to bring a plane ticket to the Manchester ICE office, proving that they will leave the country by October. And so each of these people has a family. It's going to amount to about 2,000 people from the Rochester area, all of whom are working, going to college. They've been following the law. They've been checking in as they've been told to check in. We just decided as a nation to deny them asylum. They're going back to a place they haven't been for 20 years where they may very well be killed when they get back. So we've been having vigils with the faith community every day that this group of people has to check in with ICE, and every time they have an appointment, we've been there to pray for them, we've been there to support them, we've been there to ask our local office of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement to change their mind, to use their discretion and allow these people to stay.
How much discretion do they have?
Quite a bit of discretion.
Really? Even with the new administration and its hostility to immigration,
Yeah.
they still have some discretion.
Yep. Each individual deportation agent and each individual office has quite a bit of discretion. And so it's back to this moral compass thing.
Yes.
We've
Oh,
led
yeah.
these people on. Some of them have purchased houses completely
Right,
within
sure.
the law.
I
But
think
now we're
right.
saying you must leave.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I think we should ask you to tell the stories of some of the people that are caught in this, because I know you know them. And, there's nothing like actually telling a personal story to understand the horror that this involves for people that have come here with every aspiration that the Statue of Liberty welcoming lamp was for them, as well as your
Right.
was it
Sure.
grandparents or parents?
My grandparents.
Your grandparents coming in to
Sure.
Ellis
Yeah.
Island in the early aughts.
And my grandfathers never became citizens of the United States.
Sure.
They never. My grandmother became a citizen just before she passed away. I mean, so think of that. I mean, it was a long time ago, but given that situation, we could all be. Well, we were born here, so my dad was born here.
Yeah.
But they could have all been sent back.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, I mean,
crazy. It's crazy.
Yes.
Think about these people that Sarah Jane's talking about.
Yes.
If they'd happened to have been brought here when their mother was pregnant and born here, they'd be citizens.
Right,
But because
exactly.
they were born, wherever, in the Philippines, in Mexico, in Guatemala,
Right.
and they're brought here, they're now at risk under
Right.
this rescinding of the DACA program. It's just incredible.
That's inhumane.
We're being told it's time, because we always do in the progress report. We take a couple of breaks, and we're going to take one right now. But I hope, folks, you will call in and join us. You don't have to agree with us. We're happy to entertain people that don't want to agree with us at 640-3091. And we're going to continue to talk about this, and we're going to get into the issue for the DACA people that are here in New Hampshire when we come back, and maybe get on to some other issues as well with Sarah Jane Canoy and Lou D'Alessandro. So we'll be right back. Please join us if you want to. So everybody out there on Manchester Hooks at Auburn, I'm sure you're all watching us on your TVs. I hope so. And we, again, I urge and solicit you to call in and participate, 640-3091. I'm here with Lou D'Alessandro, and we are talking about the really frightening and terrifying even situation that so many of our immigrants are facing here across the country, and in particular New Hampshire, and with the latest thing being the rescinding of the DACA program to protect the so-called Dreamers. And Dreamers stands for nothing more than children who were brought here by their parents who are undocumented when they had no choice in the matter and have now known no other home than the United States, or here in New Hampshire as one of those United States, and now being threatened with rather drastic consequences under the announcement by the Trump administration through his Attorney General, not Mr. Trump himself, just yesterday. And whether this is really going to mean anybody's going to be deported, we hope not, but that's a subject that we're going to talk about. And we're very pleased that Sarah Jane Conoy, the executive director of the Granite State Organizing Project, which has, and by the way, they decide on what they're going to do, not on the basis of what the staff wants. They decide on what they're going to do on the basis of what the faith communities and others that they represent think is the number one project. And right now, apparently that number one project, or darn close to it, is protecting the rights of immigrants to have due process and a fair process before they are given the drastic requirement to deport them for deportation. You know, it's interesting, when I heard you say that right now here in Manchester at the ICE office right here on Chestnut Street, so many of these immigrants, and you mentioned some Indonesians as others, the requirement is that they show up with an airplane ticket already paid for, so that they can convince these people if a deportation order comes, they'll be flown to their supposedly home, but not really their home, without taxpayer expense. And yet it apparently that's preferable to coming up without an airline ticket. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, Friday, I believe it was, one of the families, or two of the families, went upstairs and did not have an airline ticket to go to Indonesia, and they were about to be handcuffed and sent to prison. So they sent one of their children down to their car and brought in their plane tickets.
Oh, they just hadn't brought them in with them?
They wanted to see what would happen, and what would happen is that they would
Pretty drastic.
they would spend months in various prisons, starting in the Stratford County facility in Dover, possibly being transferred to Louisiana, Boston. These are all places people have been sent. And then when they were sent to Indonesia, it would be who knows when, who knows
Where.
what time of day. They wouldn't be able to tell anyone they were coming. So for the most part, the families have decided to comply and show up with the plane tickets in hand.
Some of these people must have a hard time coming with the funds to buy a plane ticket to Indonesia. It's kind of a long flight.
Yeah, several $1,000s for people who are working, normal working class jobs. So it's a lot of money. And remember, if the parents have been denied asylum, or one parent's been denied asylum, they still have children and extended families, so that whole family may go, because they're a community that values family. So they're not going to just let dad go or just let mom go. They're going to have to buy plane tickets for the whole family. And these children would have been born here in the United States.
Right.
But because of our immigration policies, they're being forced to go to this country that they've never seen with their parents, because we denied their
May
parents
not even
asylum.
speak the language
They
there.
may not even speak the language.
Wow.
So just standing out in
The
front
cruelty
of
of
the
this is
village-
just astounding.
That's
Well,
incredible.
This morning I was crying, and I never cry, but just to see these two families going in, stopping to thank us all for our support, hugging everyone, going in, following the law, just as they've done for the past 20 years. They did everything right, and now they're
Right.
being kicked out.
I think
20 years, and they've... Oh, my goodness.
one of the real tragedies is, and I have a friend who has a family member who was taken into custody. They took him to Stratford County, and then they sent him to Massachusetts, and he was incarcerated in Massachusetts. And the next step in that journey is New Orleans, and that's where they deport from.
Yeah.
But you go to, I went to the Suffolk County Jail in Massachusetts, and the prisoners are 10, 15 are in one cell. There's no bathroom in the cell or anything like that.
This is in Dover?
No, this is in Massachusetts and Suffolk County.
Yeah.
And that's a gathering point. That's where they send them. And as you say, they were reasonable. They are reasonable people. They had jobs.
Yeah.
Many of them have families here, and they're married citizens, and they have children, and the wives. In this particular situation, we took the wife of this guy down, and I mean, it's hard. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And they have 2 young children. And when's Daddy coming home? And is there a possibility that Daddy isn't going to come home? And I think we talk about, again, the home of the brave and the land of the free.
Yeah.
Well, boy, what a shocking negative this is to that situation. But one has to be there and see it. See them in those orange suits, in those cells, and their families.
In jail for no crime.
Yeah, for no crime, just being an undocumented. And I think the real tragedy is they followed a process. They followed the process. They registered. They got jobs. Many of them have green cards. They're all working. They're paying taxes, and they're active members of the community, and they're active members of the society. And they haven't done anything.
And if these were
wrong.
people that were lawbreakers,
Yeah.
they would have been deported under the Obama administration.
Sure.
And
That did happen.
Absolutely. There were
Lots of
many
deportations.
deportations under
Right.
the Obama administration.
I think a record number, actually.
Yeah, truly.
So these are people who have not fallen into that category of otherwise breaking our laws, other than by being here without the proper documentation to be here. And it's
It is a real tragedy. And I think you mentioned that there were 400
Yeah.
in New Hampshire, 8,000 in Massachusetts.
Right.
Now think of that.
well, that's the DACA people.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
That's not the immigrants that are being
No, no,
targeted.
no.
No, that's the
Many
kids.
more
that-
than
the
that.
kids. That's
Right,
the kids.
The kids that
Yeah.
were brought here by their parents, as you said earlier, and in order to qualify for DACA, they had to get good grades.
Yeah.
They have to go to college. They have to work. And there's 400 in New Hampshire, and I just saw a number this morning that said that if they were deported, they're working and they're paying college tuition, our economy would lose about $25 million a year
Yes.
from their work and
Yeah.
their.
We got a
spending.
real problem with workforce in the state of New Hampshire.
There we
Who
go.
do we think's going to take care of the old people?
Yeah.
If we don't have immigrants.
Well, I was talking to a lobbyist today. I was up in Concord for committee hearings on energy-related stuff, and I was talking to a lobbyist who represents some of the biggest businesses. And then I said, you guys complain about high electric costs in New Hampshire. What's the biggest thing you're worried about? Workforce.
Sure.
Of course.
Workforce
That's
development.
way more important than, our myth of extremely high electric costs.
Well, let me put in a plug for one of our other issues, which you touched on earlier, Senator, which is raising the minimum wage.
Right.
We know people, I personally know many people who live in Nashua who cross to Massachusetts to work at McDonald's, to work as a nursing home assistant, to work as a medical facilities coder. Why? Because in Massachusetts, the minimum wage is higher.
Right.
And $7.25 an hour is not enough to live on in New
Right.
Hampshire. So if we want to keep our young people, if we want better workforce development, we need to invest in training, yes, but we also need to raise our wages so that it meets the cost of living.
Sure. Well, it was during the O'Brien administration, when he was Speaker of the House, that we eliminated New Hampshire's minimum wage. New Hampshire set
New
its
Hampshire's
own-
no minimum wage.
Right.
We default to the federal
default
minimum
to the
wage.
federal government.
$7.25 an hour, which was established so long ago.
Yeah, well, I
It's
think-
totally ridiculous.
Well, and we're surrounded by states with higher minimum wage.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And we also have a tremendous number of people who travel those roads every day and work outside of the
right.
state.
That's right.
And we have, as we say, we have a crying need for workers, and workforce development has always been,
That's
you know,
our
a
number
big
one
item with
problem.
us. Yeah.
I think in economic development right now,
no,
that's number
no.
one.
Sure, no
Over everything
question. And the people we're looking at forcing out of the country are key people in terms of filling those jobs. Dean Kamen's got that huge project in the mill yard. He needs people. He needs educated people, a crying need for people. Dying needs people. They need over 100 people.
Yeah.
And
Have you ever seen the statistics of how many Americans have been awarded the Nobel Prize were immigrants? It's astonishing.
yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Well, when you think of Manchester, and think of the immigrant population that did so much for this city and really so much for this country.
Oh, yeah.
Making just unbelievable contributions to the society. And we're look at all of us are immigrants. I mean, the only true natives of the
We
native
kicked them out of- we kicked them out of here a long time ago.
We kicked them out, or we killed most of them. So we got a
Lord
great
Jeffrey Hammers
right.
gave them blankets infused with
Right.
smallpox.
Right, so we got a great record there, I'll tell you.
We got a great record there.
So come on,
But
let's-
anyway,
let's face up to the issue.
Yeah.
Sarah Jane, you've been participating with others from the Granite State, and I'm sure others. One is a great colleague of yours, Senator David Waters.
Yes,
He's been out there
Yeah,
at the federal building at least 2 days,
Oh,
and
yeah, several times,
maybe
yeah.
more. And talk about that, and and what's the plan for that, and what are you accomplishing, and what if people want to help you out?
Well, it's interesting because when we first started going, we were allowed to go up into the outer ICE office with the immigrants, and now ICE has said we can't go up there anymore. And so I think that means they notice that we're there.
Yes.
Absolutely.
so, yeah.
And I think that the part of what we offer is that support and comfort, but the other part that we offer is shining a light on this, because I believe our nation has good values. I believe our nation's people don't want to tear families apart. So if they begin to understand what these policies are doing, that they will stand up and take action. Another part of this is that our senators actually have a lot of power. Senator Shaheen and Senator Hassan, they're 2 of 100 people.
Yes.
They can meet with the head of Homeland Security. They can ask the head
And
of
they've
Homeland
been doing
Security.
that, haven't they?
Yes, they have.
But they've
I think
been
they
very-
have.
They've been very responsible.
They have. And so I think that this kind of public pressure helps
Yes.
them to be able to take that action. And let me just throw in here that there was a poll done in April of this year that shows that 78% of America's registered voters support the DACA kids, the DREAM Act kids. And in that number, that includes 73% of all Trump voters.
Wow.
That's
Only
amazing.
14% of the voters in America believe that these kids should be deported.
That's an astonishing number to support anything in these days.
Gives me hope.
Got to have hope.
I think we have a caller. I think it's Sandy. Whoops.
It's the line 1 phone, Bob. It's the other one.
Oh, it's closer to D'Alessandro here.
Right.
Hello there, Sandy. Are you with us on the progress report?
Just give her a second. Say hello again.
Hi, Sandy. You're welcome to the progress report.
Hi, Bob. Hi, Lou D'Alessandro. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are
We're
you,
good.
Cindy?
We're good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm hanging in there for an old lady. I'll be 80 in a couple months. And Roger and I are celebrating our 60th anniversary tomorrow.
Well,
All
congratulations.
right. Hubba.
Well, a good Bishop Bradley boy. That's it. That's what he.
Bishop Bradley boy and Central High School girl.
2 great places.
I just wanted to mention, I'm thinking about this immigration and so on, and the Polish side of my parents came in here about 1915 on the SS Cleveland.
Wow.
Went to Ellis Island. My grandparents had 1 boy at the time. They did have 4 other children afterwards when they got into America. But my uncle used to have to pay. He used to work at the Navy Yard in New York. And he
Brooklyn.
had to pay $500 for each one of them to come over. And he brought everybody over except for one of my grandfather's brothers. And actually, he got killed in World War I. But they came from Austria, and they had found out that there was going to be a war, World War I,
Right, sure.
Yeah.
and they wanted to get out of the country.
Right.
And so that was the reason they came over. And the French side, well, of course, they came from Canada. later on. But my grandmother was a cook also, and my grandfather was some type of a machinist.
Wow,
So he was able to get a job in Manchester
sure.
as a machinist. And they lived in an apartment, I would say, for close to 10 years, and then they bought their home in South Manchester, a two-tenement.
Right.
But I feel very bad for these young people because some of them work very hard, and they're very clean, and I've met several in different stores. And you know me, Lou, I'm very outgoing.
Yes, you are.
And so I'm out there talking to them and
Right.
asking them, where they go to school, and they tell me, and it's interesting. It's very interesting to me, and
Sure.
I love to see the young people getting by and getting ahead, and coming over as a young child must be very, very hard. I
Yeah.
think
Oh, yeah.
My uncle was around 8 years old,
Yeah.
but he had his mother and father with him,
Yeah.
So, but this president, my ulcerative colitis, that's all the time if I watch him.
I
Because
understand.
I have a big problem with this president for
Yeah,
a lot of different reasons,
yeah,
but especially this one because some of the people that I have met throughout my years worked very hard, and I know a lot of the young people, even the young people in the South End and Southeast Manchester, because that's
Yeah.
where I've been, most of my 80 years.
Right.
And so that's good. That little girl that's there, but I didn't quite understand what type of program it was. Roger just came back from Donna Susie's get-together.
birthday party, yes.
Oh, yeah.
And
Sorry I missed that, Donna.
well, Donna is Roger's third cousin.
Wow.
His people, oh my gosh, they go way back to 1640. It was difficult. We did some, we did some DNA, which was quite interesting. But we also did, Roger's been doing a lot of the genealogy. Fortunately, the French part, a lot of them, probably the Italians too, Lou, they had a nun or a priest that kept records.
Well, that's all the records really were kept in the church, and that's
Yeah,
that's
in
the
the
best
churches.
source of records.
Because we're having one heck of a time. It's 1640, and then Roger and I have been keeping it up from the time his his grandparents died quite a few years ago, but his parents
Yeah.
died 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and 25 years ago. But we had the book, and the first whole part was in French. I can read French a little bit. Roger can read all of it, which is good. But it was interesting, what they did for work and so on, and everything.
Oh, yeah.
He was an artist. He
Well,
was
we have
very,
a
very interesting on what some of the people did. Unfortunately, the Polish side, we've had a lot of problems because a lot of the churches, of course, in Poland were bombed, were,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Destroyed.
records were lost.
Right.
And one of my nephews tried to get a lot of information. He had a hard time going back the generations. In fact, he's gone back for very few that
So-
he could
so-
get a hold of.
So Sandy,
And a lot
I,
of our names were shortened. Like Dubis was shortened. D-U-B-I-S-Z was definitely shortened. And then the great-great-grandparents was K-R-O-K, which I'm sure that was shortened. Probably was Krolikowski or something. Because some of them, when they came over, had a hard time even pronouncing their names, I believe.
Yeah.
Right. Sure.
Like,
no doubt.
my grandmother's name was Kasarinska, but that means Catherine. I named my youngest daughter Catherine, but with a C. A regular Catherine, not Kasarinska. And of course, Joseph is J-O-Z.
What Manchester needs is a good Polish
Right.
restaurant.
Right. Right.
We haven't had one
It's
for quite a
interesting. I
while.
was listening to you talking about Naples and so on. And
Yes.
It was interesting. But I don't want to see these young people having to go back. I really don't.
Well, good for
I've
you.
met several hundred of them, and I was telling someone the other day, we were talking in stores, we were waiting in line, and I talk to people when I'm waiting in line on something. I usually do that, especially if they have a baby, a small baby or something. The maternal instinct is still there. You know, we just had our first great grandchild who's a year old now.
Well,
Yeah,
congratulations.
very good for
His
you.
name is
Congratulations.
William Patrick O'Neill Blossom.
Wow.
Well,
He's really got. We call him Will.
He's got a good hand. He's got a good
We were
handle.
calling him Prince Will for a little while, but he's
Well-
blonde-haired and blue-eyed. He's our only blonde-haired, blue-eyed person in our whole family, even though we're half Polish. My grandparents have blue eyes and the light hair and so on, but it's the
So-
black has kind of the dark eyes and dark hair kind of dominated.
So Sandy, I think we
But
should.
anyway,
I think we
so
should
this
get back to
little
our
girl,
show.
does
But
she
Right.
work in Manchester?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
she lives in Manchester. You can come down and help her out anytime.
She lives in Manchester?
Oh, yeah.
She lives in Manchester. She
yeah.
certainly does.
Right.
And she does a
Okay.
lot of good for this city and many areas. And you should
Okay,
you
so
should
does
consider
she have
supporting.
something to do with the refugees that come in, or is it just something to do with, immigrants or people, or to help people?
Resettlement.
Yeah.
Let's let you go, Sandy, and we'll let her answer that question. Because you're right. There's a
Okay, all right,
distinction
good.
between
And
refugees and
I'm
immigrants.
downstairs, but I'll go back upstairs. Roger said, "Don't talk too long." He's watching the TV upstairs, and I'm downstairs.
Okay.
But it's interesting, and I always watch your show, Bob, and you always have someone interesting. But I want to say hello to Lou
Thank you, Sandy.
and you, and good luck. And we'll just hope that the congressman, that there'll be enough of them that will vote the other way and
Great.
Right.
lean towards the other way, which I think some of them are going to, definitely.
Let's hope
Certainly
so.
is right before them now.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sandy.
Have a good
Great,
weekend,
great.
and probably see you somewhere along the way here.
Okay.
Hope so.
Thank you, Sandy.
All right?
Okay.
Hey,
Take care.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Right.
So, there really is, I think a lot of people don't really understand there's a difference between immigrants and refugees.
Yes.
They're both people who have come here from foreign countries, but, why don't you talk about that and, what,
Sure.
what the problem is for each?
Sure. So you become a refugee when you flee your country, but then you're stuck somewhere else. So the people that come here as refugees have generally been waiting in a refugee camp for several years.
Right.
They've been thoroughly checked over by several governments for many, many years, and they come here with full legal permission to be here.
Right.
There's a very small number of refugees that we allow in each year. I think it's something like 50,000 right
Right.
now. Immigrants are people who come here, whether legally or without documents, just because they come here.
Yes.
So an immigrant might come here for a job. An immigrant might come here because they're running from war in their own country, but they come here, and then once they're here, depending on where they're from, they might be able to apply for citizenship, but they might not. Our country will not accept immigrants from most of the Central and South American countries unless they wait 20 years in the waiting line. We don't accept a lot of
That's always
immigrants from
bothered me.
Africa.
People say,
Yeah.
why do you come here illegally? Why don't you get in line with everybody else? Well, that line never gets here.
20 years
Right.
long. And let me just say, all the stories we just heard, Sandy's story, the senator's story, are all about fleeing and migration. This nation was founded on migration. This nation was founded by wave after wave of
Right.
people who ran from religious persecution, they ran from hunger, famine, they ran
Sure.
from war. So why do we now say you can't run? The immigrants that are coming now are running just the same as we ran. And who here wouldn't get up and run if there was a war in the United States tomorrow?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Everybody has the right to run to safety for their
Right.
family.
Yeah,
Sure.
and would.
So-
And these are the most motivated, self-directed people.
Right.
We're getting some of the best people from
Right.
this, because it's not easy to get refugee status to this country.
No.
We have another call.
This one's on the phone next to you.
Oh, thanks. Hey, Kathy, it's good to welcome you to the Progress Report. You're with us. Please go right ahead with your comments or question.
Just give her a second.
Hello? You with us? Kathy?
She had her TV turned up all the way.
Uh-oh.
She might still be listening.
Okay. Turn your TV down, Kathy. We'd be happy to welcome you to join us.
Right.
And we're waiting. If you're ready, we're ready.
All right, just keep going, Bob.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very useful discussion. I mean, distinction to be made, I think. And, we should,
Right.
when I think about what the refugees have contributed to this country, the Boston Symphony Orchestra being one of the world's greatest orchestras because of refugees fleeing Hitler's Germany.
Sure.
There was any number
Right.
of great Jewish musicians that,
Right.
back in the, I mean, you can go on for any number of
But
examples.
remember, we turned them away at first.
Right.
There's that whole boat of Jews trying to flee Europe
The
that
St. Louis.
we turned
Yeah.
away, and we were later ashamed. And I believe
should have been.
that we will be ashamed if we deport these 800,000 DACA kids, the
Sure.
dreamers, the kids who were brought here. It's really unconscionable to say that we're going to send people back to a place they never called home.
Right.
That's what I can't understand. These kids came here. They know no other language than English. They know no other home than here. And we're telling them because their parents brought them here rather than waiting to have them born when they were actually within the territorial United States that we're going to send them away.
Back on the phone in front of Lou.
Okay, Lou. Press number 1.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay, Kathy, you're in touch. Do we have you?
Yes, hi. My
How
name's
are
Kathy.
Hey, Kathy.
Hey, Kathy, welcome.
Thank you. I just wanted to, first of all, say that I am definitely for keeping the dreamers here in the United States. I don't think it isn't their fault that parents came in illegally and they have been here for years and years, and this is their country. And I know that some people say that one of the reasons why they should be sent back is because they are taking true Americans, jobs away from them. I'm not sure if that was talked about before.
Right.
I got on the program.
No, it wasn't. So
here,
you're
on the
very,
program
very
about
appropriate for you to
15
bring that up.
years ago.
Yeah, good
and I was
point.
thinking maybe Miss Kanoy would be able to speak to that because, from what I'm understanding, she's had a lot of experience with them, and I'm sure both of you could maybe add to that. And I'll listen to the answer off my phone.
Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Thank you very much for
Thank
calling.
you.
It's an
Right.
excellent question you're raising, and
Right.
you want to take a crack at that, Sarah Jane?
Yeah, I remember reading a study in the newspaper about 10 years ago about a chicken factory down in the South where the people were saying, it's not right that these immigrants have all the jobs in the chicken factory. Our local people should have the jobs, and so on and so on. And the chicken factory actually fired all the immigrants, many of whom were working as undocumented people, many of whom were getting paid below minimum wage. They hired all local residents of the town. None of them lasted more than a week. The work was so hard, most of them left the first day. I think that right now our unemployment rate is really low. We need
Right.
more workers, not less workers.
Yes,
that's
but
true.
what would you say, Senator?
Yeah, I think
about that?
I think you're exactly right. Look, at many jobs go unfilled in New Hampshire for a variety of reasons, and we could never say that immigrants are taking the jobs of New Hampshire citizens who want these jobs. That's just not true. That's a fabrication. There are plenty of jobs that are available. You talk to George Kapadas, who's the head of Employment Security.
Yeah.
He's got these job fairs all over the state. Many employers show up, and they are ready, willing, and able to accept workers. So that's a figment of somebody's imagination, and it's really that's a bad story that gains momentum because people believe that nonsense. There are plenty of jobs available for everyone. And look at the for hire signs all over the state, and again, people like Diane, people like Dean Kamen, they're looking for people, they're looking for workers. And so there are plenty of opportunities. Immigrants are not taking citizens' jobs and forcing them into the breadline is really what this is nonsense that people are trying to create. You want to work today, there are jobs available.
Plus,
And
we all know, and you and I exemplify it, Lou, we're an aging population
Yeah,
here,
we are,
unfortunately. And there's we need young people to do these jobs. We don't have enough of them.
we need replacements.
I mean, I was talking today to a lobbyist for some of the biggest businesses in the state, BAE Systems, Sig Sauer, and I said, you claim that the real problem for your companies is high electricity prices, which is another subject we could do a show on, which is
Right.
largely a myth. He said, no, the number one problem is workers. We can't get the workers.
Right, absolutely,
That's
no question.
that's the reality.
And that's all you have to do is visit the companies. And I've visited Sig Sauer. I've
Yeah.
talked to people from BAE. I've talked to people from Diane. I've talked to people from many companies. They need people, and the strong educated workforce that we have to hold in New Hampshire. We've got to maintain that, and that's a full-time job for us. I'm very, very fortunate. All of my children came back to New Hampshire. I'm very, very lucky. Others aren't so fortunate because their kids have gone away. And like Bob's son, my daughter lived in Europe for a long period of time, worked for Save the Children, spent a lot of time in South Africa working with the HIV/AIDS population, and came back. Now she came back. We're very pleased with it. She's got a son who has some medical problems, and always good to be near the best hospitals in the world. But she came back. My son came back. He was in Virginia. He worked for Cabletron, believe it or not, and he was in Virginia.
They were once the largest
The
employer
largest
in New
employer,
Hampshire.
that's right.
Where are they now?
Yeah, so there are plenty of jobs in New Hampshire, and we should be encouraging people to get retrained, to get educated, to go to our community colleges, go to our state colleges, our private institutions. Get yourselves prepared for the new economy, for the new world, and there are plenty of jobs available, and I mean that's the American way. And I think of myself. I mean, my dad was a plumber. My dad was a heating guy. High school education. My mom never graduated from high school. My mom worked in a candy factory. Worked in Schraff's chocolates. She started when she was 16. Dropped out of high school to help support the family, and because of our desire to get educated and be part of the society and contribute to the society. People want to do that. They just and the opportunities here, we just can't deny people that opportunity, and that's to me is the great tragedy of all of this, the denial of opportunity.
We're
That's
denying
right.
people. We're denying, and we need these people. We just need these people. I mean, it's so clear. If we cut off the immigration to this country, our population will stagnate. Our economy will suffer. There will be horrible things. By the way, I always like to make the Roman analogy. I'm a big Roman history buff because I happen to think we're following the path of the Roman Empire.
Right.
You know why the Roman Empire lasted so long? Well,
Immigration.
there was a great book, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, which was interesting. But the real question is, how do they last so long? And I think one of the major things was they made everybody
They're
citizens.
citizens,
Right,
They made
welcomed
they
everybody.
under the
granted
Emperor
citizens.
Caracalla, he made citizenship open to everybody within the borders of the Roman Empire.
Right.
That's right.
You came across, they made you a legionary,
Right.
and you went to defend the borders, and then you became a Roman citizen.
Right.
And we're going there. I can't resist doing that.
There's something to be said about opening your arms and bringing them in.
That's
right?
true.
Yeah.
And you mentioned healthcare. One of the gentlemen who has been told that he has to go back to Indonesia by October 1st has stage 4 cancer.
Oh God.
Yeah, you
He
should.
goes to his
we have very
doctor
little
every
time.
2 weeks.
But why don't you? I wanted to have you tell at least
Yeah.
one story of a
Yeah.
particular family that's poignant.
Well, that's one right there is how could we, again, somebody who we allowed to be here for all this time,
Right.
and now he has stage 4 cancer, we're going to force him to go to a country where they don't have the medical care that he needs.
And what's
even
what's
to
he leave
separate
behind?
A family,
Right.
grandchildren,
Sure.
a house.
Right.
And so that when you said medical, that
Yeah.
triggered that for me. But another
yeah.
one is I sat in St. Anne, St. Augustine parish in the office, and I talked to a woman and her stepson, who the woman was crying the whole time we were talking because
It's
her
very, very
her
distressing.
husband Eleazar had a flat tire, and somebody called the Deerfield police. The Deerfield police found out he didn't have a driver's license, and they called ICE. He has committed no crime other than crossing the border. His wife is a citizen. His stepson is a citizen. His 3 children are citizens. She can't work because of her health issues and because of the children's health
Hey, fellas,
issues.
I have to close.
Okay.
So
Goes by,
there's the
it
whole
goes by
family.
fast. Thank you
Yeah.
for
Right.
joining us, Sarah.
Yeah, Sarah,
Jane,
thank you. And
for
continue to do great
participating.
work, and,
Be
remember,
out there, keep
right,
working for
we
us.
got to keep the American dream alive and well.
That's right.
Okay.
That's our job.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.